We are joined today by my friend and colleague, Alex Brown. Alex works in client acquisition and sales strategy. He's a second-time guest to Conversations About Conversations. He was a part of an episode we did called Closing Business in a COVID World. Alex, welcome back to Conversations About Conversations.
Well, thanks, Ivan. It's great to be back, and I'm excited to be on your show. I had a great time the last time. I thought we had some really good interaction, and I'm excited to talk about today's topic of rapport.
That's right. We had some good laughs.
Yes.
I think I'm really glad to have you back.
Glad to be back.
We have a lot of rapport because the longevity of our relationship, it's now going back 20 years.
Wow. Makes
I
me
know,
feel
time
old.
flies. But the important thing in business is to be able to generate rapport with anyone at any time and generate it on new relationships as well. So we'll dive into that. I've been taking this whole month to focus on teaching people rapport, sharing ideas about rapport. Although I think, as you and I both believe, you could take a lifetime and you could write a whole book just on building rapport.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, it's funny you mentioned that because your first chapter in your book is rapport. I mean, there's a preface, of course, but it is rapport. And as I started to reread that, it kind of dawned on me that I spend very little time actually on the science side of rapport, and actually thinking about it and diagnosing it and thinking about ways to improve it, and seeking feedback. I just assume I'm kind of a bubbly personality. I've never had an issue necessarily. I'm not saying that I'm perfect at all, but I've always felt like I can establish rapport. But when you take a step back, there's always room for improvement. And I read your chapter and I thought, this is amazing. The single most important step, I've historically pretty much jumped over it. I just did it without thinking.
What step is that?
Establishing a connection to build trust. The way I like to think of it, your book, you talk about you have to first establish a relationship by gaining a likeness towards someone, or you like them, a mutual likeness, and then also establishing trust. And I was thinking about that, and I'm going to challenge you on something. And you can certainly, I think you'll have a good response, but I'm curious what you'll say. In the first chapter of your book, Conversations, you mentioned, you feel like in order to have trust, you have to like them. And I'm not so sure that's actually true. And here's what I'll say. I respect some people that I don't like, but they have agency with me, and therefore they've earned my trust, but I don't actually like them as people. I like what they espouse. I like their values, but I don't really particularly care for their style or even their personality. And yet I'd buy from them, but I don't like them.
So you buy from people you don't like?
Sometimes, if they earn my respect. And I'll give you a great example. I buy a service from someone that I personally I don't like the person. I don't like the way he speaks. I don't like his vulgarity. But I love the product, and he's actually everything I've ever checked out on his claims for this product have been true. I buy.
So how long do you expect this relationship to endure?
Yeah, longevity could be an issue. I think that's right. I think that's a good point, actually. Don't know the answer to that. As long as the product works and I don't have an alternative, I'll buy from him.
So that's where I appreciate the challenge, and it's worth challenging, because that's just my point of view, is that I want to do business with people I like and I trust, and rapport as a foundational concept in my definition is, do I like this person? Do I trust this person?
Mm-hmm.
And then two, I distinguish in the book between, plug in the book, of course, distinguish in the book between customers and clients.
Mhm.
And customers being transactional, like, yeah, I could do business once or twice with somebody that I don't like. I have done and probably will still like almost you regret that you did business with
Yeah.
someone you don't like,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But if I want an enduring relationship, and that's the kind of relationship that I think we ultimately want as relationship managers, both in our professional and personal life,
Mhm.
if we want an enduring relationship and not transactional, I guess you don't have to like somebody, but goes a long way
Yeah.
to building that relationship. And you may have also recall my quote is a relationship, like just like a chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Mhm.
A relationship is only as strong as its weakest conversation. And so even the fact that in the back of your mind, you're thinking of this person and you trust them, but you don't like them, that weakens the relationship you have with them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's right. I would agree with that. Yeah, good point. I think and you've succinctly summarized it. It's a customer versus a longtime client, and there's a big difference.
Yeah. And then there's, like there's customer service, which oftentimes is just the person is in line, they get to the front of the line, they deal with the person once, that's it.
Yep.
And we
They're
all
out.
know and have experience. You can't really build trust. You may like the person, but now we're going to give in this episode, we're going to give 4 strategies for that from the book,
Mhm.
but they're the best strategies that everyone can easily implement. And we'll get to that in a bit. Before that, though, I want to tackle 2 questions with you. And the first question is, why do you believe that achieving rapport is so important?
I think it goes back to what we just talked about, which is you're establishing this trust. And in order to facilitate anything, you've got to have trust. You've got to have a relationship. So to me, the fundamental key to moving to agreeing to next steps and taking the next step is first you have to be comfortable. I thought about it a little bit too, and I think it's this pandemic and everything we're doing is, I don't want to say it's fundamentally changed the desire for a relationship, but it's forced us to acknowledge that we all want to be seen, and the nonverbal cues are gone. So in your book, you talk about you got to, do the homework. And I've got some ideas on that later on that maybe are a little bit different because most of us are working, or many of us are working from different circumstances, either at home or partially at home or remotely entirely. But I think this is a perfect time is what I'm getting at with this pandemic and with all the change in the way we work, to remember that everyone wants to be seen, acknowledged.
It's a little ironic because of the 18,000 last conversations I've had. And yes, I keep a log of my professional conversations. Only 325 of them have been in person.
Wow.
And Zoom is, other than the podcast, Zoom is like a dozen. So most of what I've refined in terms of the art of conversation, it's like pure, to me, the phone is pure conversation because that's
Mm-hmm.
all you have tone and you have pitch and that's all you have to go on. So that's one of the reasons that I added the section that I added. But I want to answer the question that I asked too. And that would be the question, of course, is why is achieving rapport important? And there's so many answers, but I'm just going to use one answer. And that is a conversation without rapport is so much more difficult. It's awkward. It's stilted. It's not collaborative. It's all the things that we don't want when we go into a relationship with somebody. We don't want to not like them and not trust them. We want to like people and trust people, but if we don't establish rapport at the beginning and then maintain it, it's really hard.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it can be hard for one party or both parties. When both parties feel the same way, it's a killer. It's truly a killer.
I would have conversations with people about, this was at a previous company, about retaining the company that I was working for at the time or not. And this is where I came to like and trust as the key definitional concept, or simple way to define rapport. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could define rapport, but like and trust is kind of the two check boxes. And we just have these conversations, and I would say, you don't like us, do you? You don't trust us. And it was usually actually the opposite order. You don't trust us, do you?
Right.
And you don't like us either. Why are you paying us a lot of money if you don't like us and you don't trust us? And that was one of the places I came to. That there was another place I came to. You're probably familiar with Brian Tracy.
No, I'm not.
He's an awesome sales trainer. This is going back into the 80s here. He's got a lot of longevity as a speaker and a trainer. Definitely check him out, Brian Tracy. And he would say there's 5 objections to a sale. And hopefully I remember all 5, but it was no like, no trust, no hurry, no need, and no money. So no like, no trust, no hurry, no need, no money. And so I also kind of pulled that from Brian Tracy to say, you're right. If I don't like someone, if I don't trust someone, if I don't have a need, like if they're selling me, and we'll talk in future episodes about needs-based conversations versus topics-based. But if I don't have a need, if I don't have the money, if I don't have a problem, then it's, there's no fit. The second question I wanted us to tackle is, what are the challenges that people have, either for you or for people in establishing rapport and maintaining rapport with people?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. To me, rapport is something that often, historically, it often took in-person meetings. I know that your book is, on the phone, but many folks said, I would establish rapport quickly, or I would not establish rapport quickly. But what I've found is that it tends to kind of just be natural. You're not forcing it. And that's the art of rapport. The science of rapport, I think the book does a great job, saying, look, there are certain things, certain steps that one can do, including building it, the rapport sandwich, and doing the homework. And you do all these things, and there's a checklist, which is great. And I think we can all improve with rapport. I think in terms of, I guess the heart of the question is, it's a hard one to answer because you have to be your own critic, right? Your own critic on what you do poorly. I tend to want to get to the sale too quickly. And I had an interesting quote from a guy it's really, I read his book. It's called The Invisible Leader, Dr. Mercurio. And he said, the most critical step forward as a society in communities, organizations, and schools is to become interested in each other again. And to me, it's that you mentioned in your book, curiosity may have killed the cat, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's curiosity, it's intellectual curiosity and interest in others that are going to make you a great relationship manager. I think that's spot on. I think I've got to always be curious. And in order to build rapport, you have to have a genuine and authentic interest in learning about others. And so you can go through the model, you can do all the steps you've laid out, which I think they're great. I mean, in fact, I wrote them down in my bullet journal, and I've got them there, and it's marked, and I have an index, so I know exactly what the steps are. But if you've ever been on the other end of a phone where someone in monotone says, tell me about your life, Ivan, it just doesn't work. So it's got to be a smooth and authentic, really a desire to, I really want to know, what does Ivan Farber do and think? And the one thing that I've done, and I've completely stolen this from a teammate of mine by the name of Mike, is you mentioned in your book that there are kind of 4 things you can talk about: education, career, family, hobbies. I like to also ask and ascertain how they think with one question. Tell me how you think about the future, and leave it at that. And it gives some insight into how they think, how they view the world. And in this climate today, with such a polarization, I don't judge anything. I just ask it, and they can go anywhere they want with it. How do you think about the future? And they love it. I've never had anyone say, I don't want to talk about that, because everyone wants to tell you how they think about the future. So I found that to be a kind of one of my secret weapons in discussions in my current role, and also with just people at, I haven't been to a cocktail party anytime lately, but a dinner party, I think I'll use that, because it's a great way to engage. It's not threatening. You're not asking what school they went to or where they're from. You're just saying, you got to have a little bit of a rapport first, but I find it to be a very effective question. How do you think about the future, Ivan? And
I love that. I love that question. I'm going to steal that from you, from stealing it from him, for book number 2. And I always say, and we'll talk about this more in when I'm focused on using questions skillfully. That'll be the next unit that we do. But yeah, what do you think? How do you feel? What's your opinion? And so with that one question, tell me what your thoughts are about the future. Tell me how you feel about the future. That's awesome. So I'm going to riff off of that. I want to answer the question that I asked you, and now I'm asking myself, and that is, what are the challenges people have? And the way I want to do that is as a benefit that you're here having this conversation with me, because I see you, and you said this earlier, I see you as a natural. Like, you are one of the most extroverted people that I know, and you are really good in a room. And so COVID does take away some of your home field advantage.
Yeah.
That you're great in a room. I'll never forget the strategy. We talked about this recently, the strategy that you would mess up your hair going into a meeting. And you did that. It was a rapport thing too, right? You wanted them to kind of be curious about you. Was that
ask more? Yeah, I think the rationale was, oh, who's this guy? What's happening here? And then I have another friend that wears purple shoes to every meeting, and you'll always remember him because he always has purple shoes. So.
Yeah, it's like, can we really trust someone who's perfect? Like, if they have a suit and a tie, and can we trust them? But if they have a suit and a tie and their hair is a little bit messed up, anyway. That was just something that you did. I don't think you do that. You don't do that anymore.
I don't have enough hair.
There you go. So I was not a natural at building rapport, and I thought I was. So there I was thinking I was an extrovert when I was really more of an extroverted introvert, or an introverted extrovert, or an omnivert. I've heard that.
Omnivert, yeah.
An omnivert. So it was when I worked with my tour mentor about 13 years ago, where he's like, you don't really know how to get rapport, do you? So there are the extroverts that do it naturally, like I think you do. And then there are the introverts that don't have a strategy at all. So when I wrote the book to teach relationship managers how to manage their relationships, one conversation at a time, to me that the chapter is more about the art of conversation. But yeah, what I put in the chapter is the science of it, the 4 strategies. Ultimately, what my vision is that I could do like a live course called Conversations, the course, because it's one thing to read it. It's another thing to listen to it. For those listeners who are hearing this right now, stay tuned for the audio version of Conversations so you could listen to it. But it's a whole nother one to practice it and role play it. And so that's my vision in the future, Alex, is a course, Conversations, the course, where you would actually role play it.
I love it. It's real time. It's instant feedback. Yeah. Record the video, let them see it.
And we won't do it today, but maybe in a future episode, we'll do some role playing about rapport, because you really, even though you think, well, wait, I need the difficult person to be present with me to practice it. What I've found is, no, you and I could play pretty difficult people, and the simulation would feel real.
Yeah.
But just in summary, extroverts aren't scientific enough. They're not methodical enough. And so they leave opportunity on the table. And then the introverts just avoid building rapport and they jump right into content, and
Yeah.
it just makes for less effective conversations. All right, let's give the people what we promised. There are 4 strategies in chapter 1 of the book. The first strategy is called the Rapport Sandwich, which, by the way, I'm getting kind of hungry. And when I think Rapport Sandwich, makes me hungry. Tell me, you use the Rapport Sandwich. You've told me that. Tell me what your thoughts are about the Rapport Sandwich.
I think it goes back first of all, for the listeners, Rapport Sandwich is you're circling back. So think of it like, metaphorically, it's like a sandwich, I guess. And, you put the meat in, and then you listen, you give them one piece of rapport, and then you circle back at the end to show that you've been listening. They know that you have seen them and their uniqueness. So I think a rapport sandwich, what it actually does effectively is first of all, it shows the person you're doing it to, or that you're speaking with, number one, you listened. Number two, you're acknowledging that you listened, and then you're circling back to say, look, I get it. You're unique, and I heard this, this, and this. And it also, by the way, does something that I think is very important as a salesperson or a relationship manager. It allows you to connect and remember that person. I have a trouble with names. And if I remember, Ivan's the one that wrote the book, and I say, Ivan, I can't believe you wrote that book, Conversations. And I circle back to that at the end of our conversation. If I just met you, I remember Ivan wrote the book. And so that rapport sandwich is a very effective way for the person being listened to, and not to end in a preposition, but being heard and seen, depending if they're audio or visual, or felt if they're kinesthetic or whatever. I just think it's just such an effective way to make them know that you're there, you're listening, feeling, and hearing. You get them.
Right, because many times people rush right over just asking simple questions like, what's going on in your life? But then number two, how many people say, oh, how are you? And then they move right on, and let alone paying attention and being sincere and interested. I don't want people to get the idea that it's a manipulative tactic, although I have lots of theories about the whole reason we have conversations is because we have an objective. We want something. But either way, it reminds me to both start a conversation with rapport, and then, let them know I'm sincerely interested, because you can then do the other slice of bread at the other end and wish them well. And it gives you a point for your next conversation as well.
Yeah.
I will say I had a mentee once that I worked with who was so good at the rapport sandwich, but he was more of good with the bread. And so he might have, let's say, a 30-minute conversation, and it was like 25 minutes rapport, which he thought was good, but the bread is not the whole sandwich. We had this whole, after a conversation that we had listened to, we said, where was the meat? Where was the beef? Where's
the beef?
And this was at least 10 years ago, and he still remembers when we gave him a hard time about where was the meat. So just because you have a sandwich doesn't mean that it's all bread. In fact, think about sandwiches that are all bread, and
it's not so good.
No, it's not tasty, it's not nutritious. There's no, especially if it's hollow bread. All right, so that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is gather information systematically, which we've kind of alluded to. There's 4 major areas: education, career, family, interests, and hobbies. And what I did is distill it down from where I first heard the concept was from a book called How to Swim with Swim with the Sharks and They're All Sharks. No, that's not the exact title, but the exact author is Harvey Mackay. And basically he had the Mackay 66, and he had a list of 66 things that he would gather about everyone. And he was an envelope salesman.
Yeah.
And so he's like, it's an undifferentiated product. You can get envelopes.
It's a commodity,
anywhere.
basically. Yeah.
Right. And so when you and I are talking about, and this show is for primarily relationship managers, client facing professionals, like you want enduring relationships, and showing that interest systematically really, really makes a difference.
I think that's right. And you talk about the is it the homework piece here? Are we at the homework piece? In when you talk about built, the sandwich, and then you do your homework or research. I actually would submit today that the homework has changed for some people. Now, it's always been the same for you, and I acknowledge that, and I get that you're coming from it from a being on the phone all the time. I get that. But for many of us, we were face to face, we were traveling salesmen or women. We were doing all these things, and oftentimes it would be like when you and I did the presentations in person for various financial companies. What's so different is you don't have the face to face and the body language. And so I took some of the concepts that you had in here on the homework, and what I've found really effective, it's very effective, is to go online and Google who I'm going to be speaking with. Look at their bio, find out about their family, their education, and all these things, the hobbies. And if I can't find it, then I go to LinkedIn, and I can get a lot of that. And I also look at their description of their job, and I say, okay, are they auditory, visual, or can I tell? Are they using words like I feel? And I'm going to slightly tweak my outbound email to them based on those three items, how they feel, hear, or if they're using visual descriptions. And I also find that if you can kind of get it, you don't know their age, right? And so one key thing to do is look for pictures of them recently, or look at when they graduated their professional schooling. And I can kind of get a sense of age, and I will slightly tweak the message because I'm not going to be talking about Bitcoin to someone probably in their 70s, as an example.
Well, you've just done a great segue for strategy number 3, which is to match, and strategy 4, match verbal and nonverbal communication, and then adapt to people's style preferences. So you've highlighted auditory, visual, kinesthetic as a feeling. There's thinkers, there's feelers. There's people who sort by others, people who sort by self. And I go over in the book some of the, I just scratched the surface. And that's all we're going to do in today's episode is just scratch the surface here.
Right. High level overview.
Total high level overview. We could spend hours just talking about this.
Yeah.
But what I really appreciate about what you're doing is you've taken what I wrote in the book and you're testing it, you're implementing it, because I don't have all the answers for sure. I wrote a how-to book, how to do it like I do it, but I very much know I don't have all the answers, and my way is just one way. So it's really interesting for me to hear the way you're implementing it. That will really help me, help all of us. I like what you did on Google. I like what you do on LinkedIn. I shared this on another podcast that I was recently on, is I'll also look at Zillow or Redfin.
What's Redfin? I know Zillow. What's Redfin?
Redfin is another Zillow.
Oh, okay.
And in many cases, if the house that they lived in was sold recently, there are pictures, not just of the outside of the house, but the inside of the house.
Oh, wow. That's kind of creepy, isn't it?
It's totally creepy. It's totally creepy. And am I totally creepy? No, I'm not totally creepy. I'm just a little bit creepy. But the other thing is, it's good not to assume, like, I'll look up someone on LinkedIn. But what's really important is not that I just say, I stalked you, I know everything about you, but to let people tell you about them. And even like the presentation that we did, Alex, when we warmed the room, and you just, again, I think you're a natural warming the room. But when we warmed the room, if you could get one thing from just even one person sitting in the front row about their education, about what brought them there, about where are they from, like the whole, where are you from? Such a great rapport builder. Or what do you think of the weather we're having? Like if you can't ever think of something to ask, nobody can resist the opportunity to talk about the weather they're having, because it's so safe, so safe.
Yep.
And that's actually a concept that I believe for people, for those introverts that are really hard pressed to like think, how do I get rapport? Just start with something really easy, and then build either deeper or higher, however you want to kind of think about the metaphor. But like if you're peeling it back, you don't want to go right for the deepest secret of somebody when you're first getting to know them. You want to build to that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think from an introvert's perspective, I have a lot of friends that are introverts. They're very anxious. They get nervous. And so I think there is an inherent advantage of starting with the safety first, like, hey, how's the weather? Where are you from? How do you think about the future? And then get into the more pointed questions after you get affirmation that they're open, they're responding. Okay, now I'm getting more comfortable, because you get that nervous feeling in your stomach. I remember getting it all the time when I would present with you. I get very nervous, but then once we got into our routine, then it felt safe. And then you could really kind of get your groove. And I think you use the words gel for, as an illustration of the type of learning style in your book. But, whatever your learning style is, it doesn't matter. You're trying to match the audience, or in this case, it could be just an audience of one. And I think it's very important to try and match. It's very hard to do. If you're an audio person, is to get visual it's very difficult initially when you first try it. And I think that's where your book is so helpful, because I remember you list an example in there. You say, imagine saying to someone that says to you, do you understand what I just said? And you say, I see what you're saying. And I can think of examples where I'm not matching up and I'm saying just that. And I think a lot of this is being self-aware, like really reflecting, being introspective and saying, wait a minute, I didn't even respond to that person. I just did what I always do. And I wasn't acknowledging that their learning style or their approach or their speed of even speaking. I noticed that like there's total differences, for example, between Portland, Oregon, and where I live outside of Chattanooga. If I talk at this pace on the phone, a lot of times will say, they'll say something like, I don't mean to be rude, but could you slow down? And they're very smart people. I'm not trying to portray them in any way that they're anything but qualified, but they speak very slowly. And I have to match it. So if I'm picking up the phone with someone in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, I'm not going to speak at this pace. I'm going to say something like, hey, Ivan, how are you? And then I'm going to pause and wait. And I purposely write down where I'm calling. I say pause. Like I have to pause because I'll go right through it.
When I leave a voicemail for someone, I match the outbound message.
How do you do that? Tell me more about that.
Whatever tone and speed and pitch and pace of the outbound recording, I just match it as if the person was live, but of course they're going to listen to my recorded message later. So if they answer the phone and say you've reached and they're really fast, then I might leave a faster message. But if they're really kind of slow with their outbound greeting,
yeah,
be slow with it. If their voice is kind of heavy, my voice is going to be on the. I don't want people to think I'm mocking them,
right?
But when you're in rapport with somebody, there's always some kind of matching anyway. Right. And so why not give a little bit of boost to that rapport by just, someone has a kind of a deeper, throatier voice, I just add a little bit.
Yeah, I think, and I bet we did that without even knowing it, but now you're absolutely aware of it and acknowledging it and saying and doing it on purpose now. It's interesting. You also mentioned in here, and I think this ties back to matching them in your book. You talk about internal and external, I think validators would be the word I would use. And you could very quickly tell without even having a conversation with someone, there's a high probability if they're on no social media that they're an internal validator. They're just probably not, they don't really give a damn, sorry to cuss, but they don't probably care as much about other people's opinions as someone who's, very prolific with selfies or on every Snapchat and every other social media. So that's something I noticed as I started to reflect upon the last year. A lot of it could also be they're older and just not on certain social media. I get that, but given some parameters, you could probably say that there's a higher likelihood that they're an internal validator if they're not on any social media.
Yeah, and I'll make just a couple of points. One is no one is one way all the time.
Right. Good point.
And so we're all a blend of it. And two, you're just looking for any small advantage to be able to connect better with people. And I make a third point. I just echo your point. People who are on social media and post lots of pictures, they're probably more visual people. They
Yep.
probably sort by others. They check for the likes and the comments, and
Yep.
they want to connect with more people. And it does kind of puzzle me in this day and age that people can be digital hermits. But, if you sort by yourself and you're kinesthetic, and so you live in your core, and you're an internal processor, which is another dimension. Like, some people are external processors. I happen to be an external processor. For me to figure something out and do thinking, I need to have a conversation with somebody. I have to process it out loud. Where some people, that just ruins their processing. They have to process it internally.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. I think it's an interesting, I'm going to reread the chapter again. This will be my fourth time. And I always write down something slightly different. And I think what ends up happening is whatever's happening in your life, it changes the way you read it's the same letters, same words in chapter 1, but I found it to be different each time I read it. And I hone in on something different and say, boy, I could sure improve there. So I will thank you again for writing the book. It really makes me rethink, how do I build a genuine and authentic connection that establishes trust and is mutually, where we mutually like each other. And I think I just have to keep coming back to this book and keep rethinking, and more iterations. I have to swing the bat, and I've failed miserably sometimes, but I can tell you, this book has proven to be I'll call it a playbook, literally a playbook on, okay, let's, if that conversation failed, where did I fail? And I can pull up the book and say, okay, I failed in number 3 for sure, or I failed in number 2. And I think having that is very helpful. It allows one to go back and to self-diagnose, or maybe in some cases even help coach others. So I really appreciate what you've done here.
Thank you. Those are really kind words, and heartfelt and meaningful. So thank you. I'm grateful. I will say I did design the book and use the lessons in the book as a planning tool, as a guide during a conversation, and as a diagnostic or autopsy of a conversation as well. I have the 10 lessons on my monitor. And so before a conversation, I'm looking at them like, okay, here's the things I'm keeping in mind. I kind of think it through. I'm going to do a whole month 6, on preparing and planning, because that's chapter 6. And then I use it as an evaluation tool after the conversation. And I had someone listen to one of my conversations recently who I'm mentoring. And I thought it went pretty well, but then I looked at my 10 lessons and I gave myself like a 2.5 out of 10. And just because I've written a book about this and I've learned the lessons doesn't mean I don't need to learn the lesson over, or that I've mastered it. Like, it's easier to teach something sometimes than to just do it.
Sure.
Luckily, you know how they say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Luckily, I got a chance to extend that conversation, and I went to this person and said, my goal was to set a good example of using my method. I didn't do that, but luckily I have another opportunity, and then I did it. So I really appreciate that you're on your 4th listen. I designed the book to not just be like you read it once, but it really is designed to read it, maybe practice 1 chapter each month, like I'm wanting to do with all the people out there that have either read the book or will read the book, or just will partake in the content of the podcast and my social media posts. But that's the design. That is the design. So with that, Alex,
I will say it's the best thing I've done in 2020 was to I call this my get back to basics this is my playbook, and I love having a checklist and just being able to do it. So I know I've already plugged. I'm not trying to plug your book. I'm just telling you my results already have been significantly better after I actually got methodical and tactical and just delved into this. But I didn't read it all at once and just put it away. It's okay. I bookmark it. I have things highlighted and go back to it. And I think that it is very effective.
Because you're the extrovert that I wrote the book for, right? Like you have,
yeah,
you have the natural ability that you're great 8 out of 10 conversations. And so what I wanted to do is create something to make you more solid in those 8 out of 10, but also in those 2 out of 10 where you probably are missing out because of your natural ability, to give you a checklist, to give you something scientific.
Well, I'll take 2 out of 10 any day. That's great. I mean, that's incredible. So thank you.
You're welcome. Closing statement. Is there anything you'd like to say to close out this conversation?
I wrote down a quote from, and I think this quote is timely. It's the same author, Dr. Mercurio. And he said, noticing is the act of seeing others' uniqueness and showing an interest in their full life. And to me, when I read that, I thought about your book and thought about the conversations, especially in 2020 with all that's happened. And I think it's very easy to get away from noticing others, noticing neighbors, friends, family, and your business conversations. So that quote to me just stood out, Ivan, and I wanted to relay it.
Awesome. My parting, I'm going to go with a quote too, maybe 2 quotes. Let me put out the first quote and see if I want to do a second quote. And this is a quote right from the book, and it wasn't quoting me, it's quoting Carl Jung, the famous psychiatrist. He said, the meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is a reaction, both are transformed. And what I stand for, what I write about, what I really want to create out there in terms of my wish to make a difference in the business world and really transform the business world is that when you have that catalyst and that transformation of the 2 substances or the 2 people coming together, the transformation can be a positive experience or it could be a negative experience. And one way that I feel like I can contribute positively to the world is to create more positive experiences versus more negative. We have too many negative experiences.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Yeah, that's in the in chapter 1, I believe, that
exactly
in Rapport. I remember reading it, and I think that spot on. To me, that is the heart of the book. And if you can create better experiences, better relationships, it all grows from there. So
I'm going to summarize now with this: is anyone can get rapport with anyone at any time with the right strategy, the right skill set, the right amount of practice and coaching. Because if you show sincere interest, if you listen to people, if you match their verbals and nonverbals, if you pay attention to their style preferences, you can build rapport no matter what the circumstances. And with that, Alex, thank you very much for being a part of this conversation about conversations.
Well, thank you, Ivan. And thanks again for, just producing an epic book. It's been life-changing for me. And I'm sure, I hope that others will pick it up. And I can't recommend it enough. Pick it up, get your highlighter out, and go slow. Great content.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ivan.